6:47 in the morning. A cargo vessel, Liberian flag, Greek owner, international crew, was on routine passage 15 nautical miles northeast of Oman. No radio call came, no warning shot, no demand to halt, just weapons fire. An IRGC gunboat opened up without a word. 3 hours later, it happened again. A Panama-flagged container ship named the Euphoria was fired upon 8 nautical miles off the Iranian coast. It changed course and escaped. But the third vessel, the MSC Francesca, was not so fortunate. IRGC naval units forced it into Iranian waters under armed escort, published the footage, and waited for the world to react. The world waited for America. Donald Trump said nothing. No strike order, no dramatic address, no retaliation of any kind. And that silence is not weakness. That silence is the strategy. To understand why Washington isn't reacting the way Tehran needs it to, you need to understand what is already happening to Iran without a single additional missile being fired. CENTCOM's Maritime Interdiction Framework has produced the following as of today: 31 ships turned back by standing order, 4 Iranian tankers seized, 8 more stopped and forced to reverse course. Iranian oil exports, effectively zero. Daily revenue losses, $500 million. Total losses to date, approaching $4 billion and accelerating. Trump wrote on Truth Social in language that left no room for diplomatic interpretation. Iran is financially collapsing. They want the Strait of Hormuz opened immediately. Starving for cash, losing $500 million a day. Military and police complaining they are not getting paid. That last detail is the one that matters most. When a regime cannot pay its own security forces, the architecture of control that keeps it in power begins to develop cracks that no amount of propaganda can paper over. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent provided the timeline sitting beneath all of Iran's calculations right now. In a matter of days, Karg Island's storage capacity will be full, and Iran's oil wells will begin shutting down. That sentence, understood fully, is why the next 72 hours carry the weight they do. Shutting down oil wells is not a policy decision. It is a geological event. When underground pressure is released under forced blockade conditions, reservoir damage accumulates, taking months to repair in the best case, and in the worst case, permanently reducing production capacity that took decades to build. Iran isn't just losing today's revenue. It is destroying its capacity to generate revenue in the future, even after any eventual deal lifts the pressure. Here is what is moving through the water right now. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and USS Abraham Lincoln are already positioned in the CENTCOM area of operations. Together, they represent the most powerful naval force the United States has deployed to any single theater in decades. But the USS George H.W. Bush is coming. It is rounding the Cape of Good Hope, taking the longer southern route specifically to avoid the Houthi threat at Bab el-Mandeb. Open-source flight tracking data places it near the coasts of Tanzania and Kenya. In 3 days, it arrives in the Gulf Theater. And when it does, something historically rare occurs. 3 full American carrier strike groups will be simultaneously concentrated around a single operational theater. 3 carriers, dozens of Aegis destroyers, submarine coverage below, and more than 50,000 U.S. military personnel integrated into a single combat architecture across, above, and beneath the water. The buildup does not stop at the waterline. 150-plus fighter jets deployed to the region, F-22 Raptors, F-35s, F-18 Super Hornets, F-16 Fighting Falcons, B-1 Lancer and B-52 Stratofortress strategic bombers in intensive training at RAF Fairford, England, positioned for a second round of strikes if negotiations collapse. 3 additional AC-130J Ghost Rider gunships deploying to Saudi Arabia within 48 to 72 hours, bringing the regional total to 6. A brigade from the 82nd Airborne Division deployed. Total ground force could reach 10,000 troops. C-17 Globemaster and C-130 Hercules transport aircraft running continuous around-the-clock deployment sorties. Washington's objective is unmistakable: establish a fortified military zone in the Western Gulf, a fortress within which 3 carrier strike groups can operate in a protected environment while the economic clock runs down on Iran. One analyst put it plainly: the ceasefire extension is not de-escalation, it is front armor. What happened on April 22nd was not just Iran breaking a ceasefire. It was Iran revealing that its decision-making architecture is no longer functioning as a coherent system. The IRGC acts independently. The Navy acts independently. The Parliament Speaker contradicts the Foreign Minister. President Pezeshkian holds one position, IRGC Commander Vahidi executes another. The supreme leader is in intensive care. Iran never officially accepted the ceasefire extension. It also never openly declared it was breaking it. It simply had gunboats open fire in the early morning hours and published the footage on state media. The IRGC's logic in that moment was not military. It was psychological. When your wells are shutting down, your revenue is zero, your allies are watching rather than helping, and the third American carrier is 3 days away, proving you can still do something becomes the only card left. But here is the fatal miscalculation embedded in that logic. Trump does not need to respond. Every Iranian provocation that falls short of the threshold requiring a military answer simply extends the window during which the economic strangulation continues. A ship is seized. The blockade holds. Iran loses another 500 million. The wells move closer to shutdown. The arithmetic gets worse. Trump told CNN directly, there's no time pressure. Time is working for Washington, not against it. Iranian sources have outlined a coordinated escalation scenario, multiple moves executed simultaneously that could collapse global oil supply, Gulf digital infrastructure, and key maritime corridors in a single operational window. Examine each one carefully. The Yanbu pipeline, Saudi Arabia's backup export route carrying crude to the Red Sea and bypassing Hormuz entirely. An Iranian strike here doubles the global supply disruption. Fujairah, one of the world's largest bunkering hubs in the UAE, within Iranian missile range. Striking it degrades the refueling infrastructure, keeping commercial shipping alive across the Indian Ocean. Bab el-Mandeb, the strait connecting the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. If Iran activates its Houthi allies to close this simultaneously with Hormuz, two of the world's primary oil transit choke points shut at the same moment. A quarter of the world's seaborne energy trade disappears overnight. Undersea cables, approximately 7 major cable systems passing through the Strait of Hormuz, carry over 97% of all Gulf internet traffic. Iranian sources have published detailed maps of these routes, describing them as extremely vulnerable. If cut, Gulf states lose cloud infrastructure, financial systems, and communications simultaneously. Now examine whether Iran can actually play these cards. Striking Yanbu or Fujairah means Iran has declared direct war on Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the states that have so far maintained cautious neutrality. The moment Iranian missiles land on their territory, that neutrality ends. Iran cannot survive an American blockade alone. It certainly cannot survive one backed by full Saudi and Emirati military participation. The Houthi threat at Bab el-Mandeb is real, but already managed. The George H.W. Bush is routing around it specifically because Washington anticipated this vector months ago. And cutting the undersea cables? This does not hurt America or its carriers. It hurts China, whose financial systems depend on that connectivity. It hurts India. It hurts every Gulf state watching this conflict from the sidelines. It converts every neutral party into an active adversary in a single operation. Iran's escalation cards are real in theory. In practice, each one costs more to play than whatever strategic value it delivers. And a regime whose command structure is fragmented between factions that are not coordinating with each other is not a regime capable of executing a precise multi-vector escalation. The real question is not whether Iran has these cards. It is whether the people making decisions in Tehran are sober enough to calculate the cost before playing them. That question does not currently have a reassuring answer. This is no longer a bilateral confrontation. It has become a multi-party maritime security emergency. Brent crude has exceeded $100 per barrel. Insurance companies have declared the strait a high-risk zone. Premiums have multiplied to levels making commercial transit economically irrational without military escort. Freight costs have risen up to 200% on certain routes. Commercial shipping through the strait has nearly stopped. The targeting of Greek, Liberian, and Panamanian vessels has drawn third-party nations into a crisis that began between Washington and Tehran. Greece is responding to ships connected to Greek shipping interests. Liberia is the flag state of a vessel whose crew were put at risk in international waters. Panama's flag flies on the MSC Francesca, currently sitting in Iranian custody. On April 22nd, military planners from more than 30 countries gathered in London to plan a multinational mission to safeguard Hormuz. That conference was not called by the United States. It was called by the collective recognition of the international community that the strait has stopped functioning as a secure commercial waterway. Scenario 1. The negotiated exit. Iran produces a unified diplomatic position. A framework addressing Washington's demand on enriched uranium reaches the table. The blockade lifts in stages. The wells are saved. The regime survives, diminished but intact. Scenario 2, Operation Epic Fury, Phase 2. Iran fails to produce a coherent negotiating position. Trump authorizes the second phase. 3 carriers, 150-plus fighter jets, strategic bombers, and targets that are deeper and more consequential than anything struck in Phase 1. Scenario 3, the status quo continues. The blockade persists. Iran absorbs $500 million in daily losses. The wells shut down. Geological damage accumulates. Domestic pressure builds past the point of containment. The regime does not fall from a single blow. It erodes. Washington's preferred scenario is the third. Time works for Washington. Every IRGC provocation that stays below the threshold of a required military response simply extends the window in which the economic strangulation runs, and Iran has no visible path to reversing it. For 45 years, the mere possibility of closing the Strait of Hormuz shaped the behavior of nations. On the morning of April 22nd, the IRGC fired on a cargo ship. Trump said nothing, because Washington doesn't need to say anything. The blockade is working. The third carrier is 3 days out. The wells are shutting down. 30 countries are coordinating Hormuz security without being asked. The geological clock does not stop. The IRGC believes it is escalating. What it is actually doing is accelerating its own collapse. $500 million lost every single day. Oil wells approaching irreversible shutdown. A third carrier strike group 3 days from arrival. 30 nations planning multinational security operations. A supreme leader in intensive care. A command architecture publicly contradicting itself while the world watches. Iran's provocations haven't changed any of this. They've only confirmed it. The trap was set a long time ago. Iran walked into it, slowly and then all at once. And what is moving through the water right now will make everything that came before look like the warning that was never heeded.